His name is Fred Krueger, the man of our dreams. This man has been haunting our nightmares ever since 1984. He has been scary, goofy, and at times a little bit silly. But throughout his many incarnations, I believe that Fred Krueger is the best designed slasher movie villain. So, welcome back to the Kino Cave, where all Hallows Kino is still going throughout the entire month, and today I'm bringing you a very, very special, very exciting video. This is why I think Freddy Krueger is the best designed slasher villain. So, I've been a Freddy Krueger fan since I was 14. I used to be shit scared of horror movies. I really didn't like them, which is really ironic considering the way I am now. But when I was 14, I decided to fucking get on the horror train, and I started with A Nightmare on Elm Street, largely because of Cosplay Chris, which is a really great channel. Those videos made me think a lot about Nightmare on Elm Street because Cosplay Chris is a huge Elm Street fan, so I figured that's a good place to start with horror movies. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street was the first horror movie I'd ever seen, and I absolutely love the film. I will be talking about it one day on this channel and how much I love it, but today we're focusing specifically on Freddy Krueger. Freddy is my favorite horror villain. I love his personality, the unique design, the amount of thought and care that was put into creating this character, this force for evil in our dreams. I love everything about him. I love almost all of his movies, and I just never get tired of Freddy Krueger. So in this video, I'm going to be going over the backstory of how Freddy Krueger was constructed, all the way from the concept right up until being in the first movie. And along the way, I'll be telling you about why I think he is the best slasher villain of all time. That is not to say that if you are a Michael Myers fan, or a Jason Voorhees fan, or a Chucky fan, or a Ghostface fan, that's not taking anything away from you guys. I love all of those slasher villains too, but Freddy is my big favorite. So I want to start with the concept of Freddy coming into people's dreams and killing them. Because you might be thinking, how does someone come up with this? How does the genius that he is, Wes Craven, come up with this idea? So Wes Craven had read articles at the time of young men dying in the middle of nightmares. And there was a specific story about a young kid who was telling his parents that if he goes to sleep, he'll die. There's someone trying to kill him in his sleep. And this very much worried his parents. And after 3 days of being awake, he finally fell asleep and crashed. And his parents were really relieved. They put him to bed. Then, in the middle of the night, his parents heard screaming from his room, and by the time the parents got to the room, the kid was dead. And in his room they found a coffee maker, they found all the sleeping pills that they'd been giving him that he hadn't taken, that he'd hid somewhere else. And that is where Wes got the idea for a dream demon that was killing you in your dreams. So already conceptually, this is an incredible idea, especially for a horror movie, because for a lot of us, where we feel safest is in our dreams. And for a lot of us, sleep, especially as you get older, sleep becomes about the most comforting thing that you can do. You just, sometimes when you're just really, really tired, all you can think about is just going to bed and getting to sleep. And the idea that someone can take this away from you and that there's nothing you can do about it, that's a pretty uncomfortable thought to live with. So, moving on to the man, Fred Krueger. Where did he come from? The idea of this horrible, disturbing person and what he can do. So let's start with the name, Fred Krueger. So Freddy was actually the name of a kid that used to beat up Wes Craven in elementary school quite regularly. So, fair enough, Wes, you took some past childhood trauma and put it into your film. So, you were a filmmaker. He did what every filmmaker does and drew on from past experiences in order to gain closure, and I respect the absolute shit out of it. Finally, the last name Krueger came from a character named Krug, who was in one of Wes Craven's earlier films, Last House on the Left. So that's the name, but what about the guy, Freddy Krueger, the personality? So this comes from a terrifying story from when Wes was a little boy, and he heard mumbling outside of his bedroom window at night, in the middle of the night. And he looked out his window and saw a man standing there staring at him. The man was in a hat and a trench coat, and he just kept staring at little boy Wes Craven. And so Wes was obviously scared shitless, as any young child would be, as any adult would be. So he got back in his bed and he just kind of sat there for a bit and waited for him to go away. After a few minutes, Wes looked out his window again. The man had not moved. He was still there, standing in the same place, just staring at Wes Craven. And that scared him so much that, once again, he decided to use that past traumatic event to make a movie. Wes had described this man who stared at him as having a lot of malice in his face, and seeing how delightful it was for him to scare a child. And so that's where Freddy's personality came from. Just those little things that Wes experienced. The last little thing about Freddy Krueger that not a lot of people like to talk about, especially in the fandom, considering the popularity that Freddy gained as the movies went on. But Wes originally based Freddy a little bit around child molesters as well. Freddy, in the original script and kind of when they were thinking through the story, he was a child molester. And this was based around stories that were coming out about the time of teachers in school molesting their students, which is just... ugh. But anyway, this was originally the idea for Freddy Krueger, that he did this stuff, and of course he also killed the children. And this became a lot more subtextual in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. There's little hints at it here and there, but generally it's not something that's talked about very much. And then in the sequels, it's walked back to the point of basically just being omitted entirely, because when Freddy started to become a character that kids wanted to dress up as for Halloween, you can't necessarily have him have that particular backstory. And I think it definitely works. I think explicitly making him a child molester is going a little too far. The subtext is good, especially in the first two Elm Street movies, but I'm glad that they didn't go too much further with it until the remake. But we're not talking about the remake today. But definitely around part 3 and part 4, they had to walk back that aspect of Freddy as he started to become a lot more goofy and a little bit sillier, and started to become someone that young kids would see on like TV and stuff. And when he got his own TV show, Freddy's Nightmares, yes, it was a thing, let's not talk about it. Kids wanted to start dressing up as him for Halloween. So, we've talked about the man, the idea of Freddy. Now, we need to find an actor. And who was Wes looking for? A really old guy. Specifically David Warner, but he dropped out. Wes Craven found that during the casting process there was a tenderness to old people that just you couldn't find malice or disturbing enjoyment of scaring kids in an old person's face, because they had so much life experience. And so it was very difficult for them to find an actor. When a plucky, young, geeky-looking actor who was about 36 years old, named Robert Englund, came into audition. Some of the things that Wes Craven said about Robert Englund when he first came into audition was that he looked kind of semi-geeky and much younger than I was looking for. But also, he, according to Wes, he just relished being evil, which eventually Wes came around to and realised that this is the guy, and he's going to be covered in makeup anyway. so it doesn't really matter how old he is. Moving on from that, Robert Englund had one hell of a time getting his makeup applied for Freddy Krueger. He was shown real life burn victims and was told, "This is what we're going to do to you." So, setting the stage perfectly so far. And Robert said that he found a little bit of Freddy while he was getting the makeup put on, and he was getting more and more impatient and more disturbed because he had to sit still and keep his face completely still for hours while they had put this makeup on. And he said that he really found a bit of Freddy in that sort of desperation and anger to just lash out, basically. And the makeup in the first movie was so uncomfortable, apparently, that Robert would just tear it off of his face. Like, Wes would yell cut, and Robert would just pull it off of his face and throw it behind him, and the makeup artists would have to just pick it up after him as he walked away, and by the time he got into the makeup chair for it to actually be taken off, most of it was off already. Robert Englund also said that he really physicalized Freddy. He really wanted to physicalize him. He used inspirations like Klaus Kinski and James Cagney as inspirations, which is pretty cool. A final little thing that affected Robert Englund's performance for the better, and he leaned into it literally, is when he put on the glove and he discovered it was quite heavy, so his shoulder would kind of drop, and it affected his movement and his posture, but it ended up being really for the better because, I mean, look at him. I mean, you see a man just standing there staring at you with one shoulder kind of drooping down, and then you see at the end of his hand they're just like these little spikes. That's pretty scary stuff. So we have a concept, we have a personality, we have an actor. What's left? We gotta design this guy. We gotta give this guy a memorable, scary, and iconic design. And holy shit, did they do that. So the makeup artist who had done Freddy Krueger's makeup in the first film, and I don't think he'd done any of the other ones except maybe New Nightmare. I'll have to fact check that. But David Miller is the guy who did the makeup for Freddy for part 1. And he had just done Michael Jackson's Thriller, which, I mean, the makeup in that is pretty fucking awesome. And he was trying to discover a look for Freddy, like a burn victim kind of look. And, no word of a lie, he was having pizza one day. And he was thinking, and he was looking at his pepperoni pizza. And I can understand, you know, you're thinking, you stare dreamily into your pepperoni pizza. I do it often. And he saw the way the cheese was kind of melting around the pepperoni, and he started to kind of play with it. Apparently he took his pizza home with him and just started messing around with the pizza. And he made Freddy's face in his pepperoni pizza. I'm not kidding. This is what happened. And you know what? That's a face in a pepperoni pizza. Moving on from how ridiculously funny and surprisingly effective conceptualizing the makeup was, moving on to the classic Freddy fedora. I'm not sure, is this a fedora? It's a hat that looks kind of like Freddy Krueger's hat. Anyway, originally Freddy was going to wear a fedora, but Wes lost confidence in that. So they were going to put him in a kind of a paperboy flat cap kind of hat, which I can see why you'd think that that would work, but not quite. So Robert Englund had the bright idea to convince Wes Craven, yeah, let's keep it a fedora. And again, looking behind me, it really, really works. Freddy has this silhouette. Like, you see the silhouette and you know it's Freddy. There's even a poster that they put on, like, the boxes of, like, DVDs and Blu-rays for the original Nightmare on Elm Street now, of just that silhouette. And it's instantly recognizable. You see the claws, you see the fedora, and boom, that's Freddy. Onto the iconic red and green sweater. Like, everything about Freddy's design is iconic, including the fucking sweater that he wears. You see that anywhere, it's a Freddy Krueger sweater. It's not just a Christmassy red and green sweater. If you know who Freddy Krueger is, even if you've not seen the movies, you know what his sweater looks like and you recognize it instantly. But the colors of the sweater come from an article that Wes Craven had read at the time, talking about how the eyes perceive colors. And I'm not going to get into the science behind this because I'm not a scientist, I'm a filmmaker. But apparently, red and green create such a contrast when you perceive them side by side that it's very hard to perceive red and green together. They're two of the most difficult colors to look at side by side and two of the most difficult colors to process side by side. So, before Freddy has done anything, in your dreams or otherwise, he is just assaulting you with his pizza face and his fucking difficult to process sweater, and then he's got finger blades which are weird, and this is why he's the best. Another thing about the sweater that just goes to show how your limitations as a filmmaker can sometimes improve. So originally Freddy was going to have a sleeveless sweater. It was still going to be red and green, but it was going to be sleeveless. And I think it was David Miller who came up to Wes and said, look, we don't have the budget to do the burns all the way down his arms and on his hands and on his face. You're going to have to put sleeves on the sweater because we can do the face, but we cannot do the arms. And so they put the red sleeves on the sweater. This just goes to show that filmmakers always run into roadblocks when it comes to time and money and all these other kind of factors. And sometimes it can work out for the better. Oftentimes it does work out for the better. In the cases of Nightmare on Elm Street or a bunch of other movies that I'm not really going to get into because I don't need to tell those stories in a video about Freddy Krueger, but these things happen all the time, and a lot of the time it works out for the better. On to one of the most iconic things about Freddy Krueger, and in my opinion, the best slasher weapon, his clawed glove. We know that Jason Voorhees is known for his machete, and we know that Michael Myers is known for his butcher knife, and Chucky's known for having a knife, and Ghostface has his... I can't remember the name of the blade. You know, the Ghostface blade. Yeah, they're pretty iconic. But at the end of the day, they're just everyday kind of average weapons. Not taken away from them, but think of how iconic and different and unique Freddy Krueger's weapon is. Like, no matter what you do, if you make someone wear a glove with claws on the end, you're just imitating Freddy Krueger. Whereas half the fucking slashers out there have butcher knives. Freddy easily has the most iconic weapon of any slasher villain. So Wes wanted Freddy to have a different kind of weapon to any other slasher villain. He didn't want him to just have a knife. So he thought about what the cavemen would use and what they would be fighting back in prehistoric times. He thought about the claws of an animal. And while he was thinking of this, he saw his cat doing that thing that cats do with the claws where they go like that. And he's got the claws and the claws are kind of coming out like that. I don't have a cat, but they do that. So that's what gave Wes the idea. Let's have him have a clawed glove, and let's have it be something that he'd made himself. And so Jim Doyle designed the glove, the iconic glove, and you can see the blueprints. They're freely available on the internet, the original blueprints for Freddy's glove, and it's a really incredible design. So simple, so iconic, and again, it just adds to that silhouette that Freddy has. And in case you want to know, it is a simple leather workman's glove, a brass backplate, and copper piping for the fingers, and tomato knives are the claws. They are tomato knives that have been turned upside down. And there you have it. A horror icon has been created. Freddy Krueger. So I wanted to end this video on why I love Freddy Krueger. Why is he my favorite? Now, I've given you a lot of reasons why he's iconic, why he's so cool, but I want to give you my personal thoughts. And I know that people are probably just gonna look at, my history with Freddy Krueger and say that it's just nostalgia or whatever. And yeah, there's an element of nostalgia to it, as there is to most things. Think about something that you loved as a kid, and think about how much nostalgia probably affects that. But outside of the nostalgic aspect to it, I do genuinely think that Freddy is the most iconic slasher villain, and one of the most iconic villains in cinema. He's so unique, from his look to his personality to his voice to the way he kills people. It's instantly recognizable and so different from everything else. Freddy Krueger is a man who does what he does simply because he enjoys it. He loves playing with his food. He loves to prey on his kids, create fear in his victims before he kills them. And I know that other villains like to do that too, like Pennywise the Clown and stuff, but with Freddy Krueger, it's just out of this sick sense of malice more than anything else. He doesn't have to scare his children before he kills them. He just enjoys it. He really loves doing it, sometimes to his own downfall. He's got such a strong personality. And I think that's what's so attractive about him. That's why, above all else, he has become the slasher villain that kids enjoy watching. And he's the one that's kind of become so interesting and funny over the years, because he's got so many one-liners, so many unique dream shit that he does, like extending the arms across an alleyway, like making people float, like sucking them into a bed, like drowning them in a waterbed, like pulling his own scalp off to reveal his brain. So much of this is so unique to him, because Michael Myers can't do that. Michael Myers is an iconic slasher. Jason could be argued as the most recognizable slasher for his hockey mask, but they can't do the things that Freddy does. They can't throw people around a room. They can't come out of the beach like Jaws. That's a bad example. They can't turn people into cockroaches. They can't literally suck the life out of you. They can't be a video game. Again, bad example. But it's true. And I think there is a reason why Robert Englund is the only real Freddy. It's so unique to him. Michael Myers, they recast him for every movie. Almost every movie. And that's not to take away from those actors. I really like James Dew Courtney in the new Halloween films. And I love Nick Castle as Michael Myers in the first Halloween. And Kane Hodder is the best Jason. And Derek Mears is a really good Jason. But there's only ever really been one Freddy. Jackie Earle Haley's a great actor. But as Freddy, you can't beat Robert. He is that character. He just tapped into something back in 1984 that has been going ever since then. And when you think of Freddy, you can only really think of Robert. He brought so much life to this performance. A couple of other kind of just superficial things. Freddy's got the best one-liners. I mean, come on. Welcome to the prime time, bitch. This is God. I love soul food. You've got the body. I've got the brain. You're all my children now. He's got so many incredible one-liners. And again, Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees don't have that, largely because they're mostly mute. But I don't even think they're as iconic as lines from Chucky or Ghostface. Ghostface has some good one liners, but you can't beat Freddy's. Bringing it back to the idea of someone killing you in your dreams, I think that just adds to how terrifying Freddy is conceptually. You can watch the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie and not be scared by it. I wasn't that scared by it when I watched it for the first time. And again, I was shit scared of horror movies. Like, I watched the first Elm Street movie at like 11 o'clock in the morning with like the curtains open, the lights on. I was sitting a bit far away from the TV. I was a real pussy when I was 14. And I wasn't really that scared by it. Because, yeah, some of the special effects are a little dated, and yeah, it's really goofy. But conceptually, Freddy Krueger will always be terrifying, no matter what time you're in, or no matter how easily scared you are. The idea that someone can take sleep away from you, something that's just so comforting for so many people, that is truly terrifying. And another thing that I think contributes to how iconic Freddy is how much thought and care was put into his design. I'm going to keep comparing them, which on some level isn't really that fair. But this isn't taking away from how amazing the design of the likes of Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Ghostface are. But Michael Myers, his design is barely even a design. It was changed numerous times throughout the pre-production of the film, and a lot of it was just done because it was really cheap. The overalls were just cheap. The mask is, as many people know, is a Captain Kirk mask that has been painted white. Again, the mask, the mask cost like $2. I'm pretty sure the entire Michael Myers costume cost less than $10. And it's iconic now, but it was made because it was cheap and easy. And Jason's design changes from film to film. His makeup is never consistent. His hockey mask didn't even come in until part 3, and he has a different wardrobe in every single movie. Again, Jason's an iconic villain, and that hockey mask is probably one of the most recognizable things in horror. But Freddy Krueger's design has stayed more or less the same throughout every single Elm Street movie for a reason. That green and red sweater, that fedora, that glove, that makeup has stayed for a reason. It's so unique. There's so much thought and care put into it from the first film. And in subsequent films as well. Now look, the makeup gets very tacky towards parts 5 and 6. But that sweater and that glove stay the same throughout all the films. And it's always so recognizable. So I think that just contributes to how iconic he's been. So to me, Freddy Krueger will always be the man of my dreams. He will always be the most iconic, the conceptually scariest, and above all else, the most entertaining slasher villain to me. I could watch his scenes and his films endlessly, because every time I put in a Nightmare on Elm Street film, I'm having so much fun. I watched parts 1, 3, and 4 recently, and I loved every single one because of just how enjoyable it is to watch Robert Englund do his thing as Freddy. So with that being said, that is why I think Freddy Krueger is the best slasher villain. One of these days I will cover the Elm Street films in their entirety. I just don't really have the time or the energy right now to go in that deep, because when I do those videos, I want to put a lot of thought and care into them. So For now, you get this little tidbit about Freddy Krueger from me, and hopefully, I maybe change your perception of Freddy Krueger a little bit. Maybe you just thought he was just another one of those horror villains or whatever, and maybe I've changed your perspective on that, knowing the backstory and the history of his design. With that being said, there is so much more to come with All Hallows Kino. A lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipeline that I hope you'll really like. There's a few more videos coming out this month, and I just can't wait to get them out to you guys. So with that being said, you're all my children now. And oh fuck, what's his name?